I'm just going to get started on tonight's session. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined so far. There might be a few people just still joining, but I just want to get straight into it and get into all of the great technology that we've got at Bishopbriggs Academy that help our pupils succeed. Namely, we're looking today at Glow, we're looking at OneDrive, Satchel, Microsoft Teams and Achieve. So there's 5 kind of key programs that we're going to be talking about tonight. I've named them there very, very quickly, but I wanted to, first of all, start the session just by giving an overview of what we use in Bishopbriggs Academy and exactly what we use it for. We use these terms so frequently as teachers and we're so comfortable with the use of them in the school, but I'm aware of the fact that we would use them so flippantly and we would like to kind of make sure that's really clear for those at home. So first of all, we use something called Glow, which is our secure school email address and means of kind of accessing all of our other tools in Bishopbriggs Academy. So this is given to pupils, this email address and this pass into this Glow network. And that allows us to access lots of other tools as a pupil or as a teacher. And it just means that we have access to all these great resources. So this is kind of like the main platform that most pupils will have access to. They are given this login when they come in S1 and they will use that all the way through till they're S6. So I'll talk about that in a bit more detail today. Once you've got access to Glow, then you have access to amazing other tools as well. So one of them is Satchel. That is essentially our online diary and communication platform in Bishopbriggs Academy. So that is what we would use as a means of making sure that we can keep track of what events are happening in the school so that pupils have an understanding of what assessments they've got coming up, what homework is due, but also for us to communicate with home to all the parents and carers to make sure that they have an understanding of what's happening in the school. On top of that, we then have access to something called Microsoft Teams, which is what I'm taking this session on today. Essentially, it's an extension of the classroom, and it's something that we've built upon in COVID. And essentially, it's just a place for us to put our digital resources. So it's got all those great resources that we have in class, but the pupils now have access to them 24/7 to help support them in their learning. On top of that, we've got some external platforms as well that kind of come over and above Glow. We've got something called Achieve that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about today, which is essentially a platform for revision resources for pupils completing any national qualifications. So that would be anyone completing any national 5s or higher. And I know that that might not be relevant to those of you who have young people in S1 or S2. It will be something that becomes apparent to them later on in S3 and beyond that. And finally, the other platform that we use would mainly be YouTube. So it's a video platform that we've all probably had some interactions with, and it will allow us to provide some further help and support from departments via different media. So I wanted to just give that brief overview of the 5 platforms that we use, and essentially in tonight's session I'm just going to go into those in a little bit more detail and just give you a full understanding of how we would use them. So first of all, let's go into Glow. So I've mentioned that it's a platform that pupils are given access to when they join our secondary school. They're given this email address, they can create a password, and that serves them all the way through to S6. They need access to this Glow account and they will use this very, very regularly through the years when they're in school and when they're at home as well studying. This is something that they have regular access to. It's not something that they wouldn't have to access week to week or day to day. So it's something that they do already know. But the reason I'm bringing that up and the reason I'm highlighting this as a platform is that it has so many other means of uses for Glow. So we've got our school email address, which is one aspect of Glow, but it gives us access to Teams and Satchel, which is 2 of the platforms that I've mentioned. But it also gives access to the Microsoft Office platforms as well via something called OneDrive. So OneDrive is essentially a cloud storage for your documents. If anyone's used Apple products or Google products, it's essentially like your Google Chrome account or your iCloud account. It stores all documents and work in the cloud, and it means that then you can access it from any device, anywhere. Now, the benefit of that for pupils is it gives them access to these Microsoft Office platforms, so Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel, so it means that they can complete their schoolwork, but it also means that they can save it to this cloud storage and they don't need to worry about saving lots of different versions of things. So it's a really, really great tool just for when they're completing folio work or anything else as well. The other thing that it also gives them that I'm just mentioning for senior pupils mainly is Scholar, which is something, again, gives you some extra study materials or coursework that we normally indicate to senior pupils. To go into how to access Glow in a bit more detail, I've just given an example here just in case there was anyone that needed a little bit more support. Normally the Glow username starts with ED027 for Bishopbriggs Academy. Then it would be the pupil's first initial, their surname, and the year that they joined the secondary school. They then would have a Glow password, and it's really, really easily reset by any teacher in school. So if they are having any trouble with this, if after the call you try and log on with them and they're having any trouble at all, please make sure you get in touch because it's really easy for us to sort that for them. Once they get onto Glow, they will have something called a Launchpad. So this is what it looks like day to day when they log into Glow. They have these little things called tiles, and the tiles are essentially like apps on the phone. So it means that you can search or pin for whatever you wanted on there, but the most common things that they will reach for as pupils will be their email, the OneDrive that I mentioned earlier, this cloud storage, Satchel 1, the homework platform, and Microsoft Teams, which is the kind of extension of the classroom, so the digital resources. Diving into OneDrive just in a little bit more detail, so this Microsoft Office OneDrive, it normally looks like a cloud, the little tile, and you can access it just by clicking that tile directly if you've logged into Glow, or you can also access it via the View My Files tab in Microsoft 365. Once they click on that, they will have access to these Microsoft Office platforms. So as I've mentioned previously, pupils may need access to typing up folio work. They may need access to Word, to type up folio work. They may need to create a PowerPoint presentation as a homework task. So this is just one way of being able to access those tools and make sure that they have the Word document or PowerPoint presentation accessed via any device that they wish to use. Moving on from the Glow Launchpad, we are now going to talk about Satchel 1. So Satchel 1, as I've mentioned, is an online diary and communication platform, and all of our class teachers post all homework, all assessments, grades, any announcements at all via this Satchel 1 platform. And really it's central to Bishopbriggs Academy. It helps us ensure that we're all up to date, all pupils and parents know exactly what's upcoming. Teachers will link any relevant materials for pupils, and it really allows that kind of ease of use, so it's no longer a stress if they lose materials. The example that I've got on the image there is just an example from my S2 science class who had a test coming up. I've put on there that it's a body systems test. They've got the date that it's due, they know that it's upcoming. And if you click on to the test itself, you'll be able to get a bit more information about that. And this is a very typical post for the teachers to give pupils. So it will tell them if there's a class test or a homework task due. They maybe link any relevant resources, so any PowerPoints from classwork, any flashcards to help with revision. But it really, really helps you at home to make sure that they can be supported if they're a bit worried about a test coming up, if they're unsure where to get started in terms of revision. All of the relevant resources the teachers will have linked within Satchel as well. So not only is it giving you that kind of opportunity to support the young ones at home, but it also allows them to take responsibility for their own learning. So it allows them to plan their week effectively. They don't have to sit and write down every single aspect into a paper diary. It's now done for them on this app called Satchel 1. It also allows us to communicate with you to make sure that there's frequent communication, whether that's via grades in between monitoring and tracking periods, or if it is also any points of success as well, so anything that's went really well in class. Ultimately, we really want to support our pupils in all areas, so it's about making sure that communication is really key, and that's just one of those platforms for that. If you are hoping to access Satchel 1, there are 2 ways that pupils can access it. They can either log into Glow via the Launchpad that I mentioned earlier, or they can download the free Satchel app onto their mobile as well. That's normally recommended just because it's the easiest point of access for most users. If the pupils do have a mobile phone, it just means that they get the notifications just to remind them and keep them on track. But there is no hassle in terms of logging into Glow and clicking on the tile as well. It's just making sure that they're checking that regularly to make sure that they're not missing any updates. Now, the huge benefit from Satchel 1 is that pupils, parents and staff each have their own login information, so you don't have to use the pupil login to try and see what's happening. You will be generated your own login to access Satchel, and you'll be linked with your young person, and that you'll be able to see any work or tests or anything at all that's happening for them. If there is anyone at all that is struggling to get access to Satchel at all, whether that's via a pupil's point of view or from a parent's point of view, please get in touch. It's, again, a really straightforward thing for me to sort out for you. I'll give you my email at the end of the session and you can let me know if there is any issues with that at all. In order to download the app, just another side note, it's available via any of the app stores. So if you just search Satchel 1, it looks like this, the little tile with the navy background, and it's completely free. It shouldn't cost you anything at all. Okay. Now that we spoke about Glow and getting access to Glow, and we spoke about Satchel in terms of the communication platform, I want to talk a little bit more about exploring Microsoft Teams. So Teams is essentially, like I mentioned before, an extension of the classroom. It's where all of the classroom resources are available. Now, prior to COVID, we just didn't have a platform like this where pupils could access any one of their class materials at any time. Now we have all of the class PowerPoints, any previous workbooks or worksheets or help videos, all available on these Teams, and it's just so vital for them to be able to access all of those resources we see now in a post-COVID world where the pupils are accessing this at all times. They're able to then be able to structure their revision and focus on areas that they find really tricky without having to carry around a whole bunch of resources. Everything is available digitally. Now, each team is usually registered to a class. So some of the examples I've got on the screen at the moment, Miss Carlin's S1 Science 1P3 is my 1P3 class, so that would be a science class for me, and I would link all of my relevant resources for my S1s in that team. So that would be usually via the Files tab with under the class materials and then under each of the topics that we would work through in science. We also have other ones for physics, so maybe if we were sitting National 5 Physics, it might be a larger team where the whole year group's on there, and it means that then they can help one another as well as share resources. One thing I do want to talk about in a little bit more detail though is our S4 and S5-6 supported study teams. Again, pre-COVID, this would have been something that maybe wouldn't have happened, but it wouldn't have been a solution that we would have tried to find. But now in a post-COVID world, we're really utilising these digital tools. And we've come up with a really great solution for supported study where the pupils have access to all of the supported study materials for all subjects via one of these teams. To show you what Teams looks like when you explore them, this is just my general team at the moment, not the supported study team. This would be what the Nat 5 Physics one looks like in Files. This would be what some of the class materials would look like, just as an example. So this would be for any of the units in physics that you could access. But within the supported study team, they have access to lots of different channels, so lots of different departments. So if, for example, they wanted to look at accounting, they could look at accounting specifically and look at the files that were available there, and that would give them a week-by-week structure on what to study for accounting ahead of any prelims or exams. Our supported study blocks are split into two. We have one prior to Christmas and then we have one starting in just a couple of weeks' time. And we essentially want to make sure that we target pupils who need it the most in person and really broken down. And then we would make sure that we have still a great area of support within this universal team where all of the pupils have access to all of the materials given in supported study and also have options of challenge. I want to quickly just show you the supported study team. Okay, so this would be my teams from a teacher's point of view. I have all of my teams here, And I'm just going to click on one of the S4 supported study teams just to give you a bit of a better insight than just some of the images that were on the PowerPoint there. Now, if I go to my subject, which is physics at the moment, I can show you an example of what one of the supported study blocks would look like for senior phase. Now, the structure would be that you would be given week-to-week tasks, exactly like supported study would be if you were in person. But then instead of it being targeted, it means that you have then a much more larger range of resources available to you via the supported study team. So if I was supporting one of my physics pupils, I have a video lesson there that they can follow along with, that they can hear me talk through all of the key concepts, pause the video to complete tasks. They've then got assigned tasks via the video, and then they'll be given some solutions there as well. So everything's kind of laid out with a clear structure for pupils to work at their own pace, and it allows them to really get started in terms of their revision. So this is available normally for both blocks. So block 1 just before Christmas is available just now for the S4s and S5s and 6s. And then in block 2, that'll be available in February. So even if your son or daughter is not already in S4, S5 or S6, this is something that we have embedded into our senior phase, and it's something that they will be sort of working towards as they work through the school. So they will be getting used to using Teams. It will be a support that will be in place at that time. So it's just making you aware of some of the supports that are available for senior phase. Okay, so go back to the very last section, which is Achieve. Achieve is the final platform that I'm going to talk through in a lot of detail. This again is maybe slightly more relevant for senior phase. Some of the third years will benefit from this towards the end of the year as they're preparing for the S4 transition exams. But this is a platform that we've actually bought into as a school. It's an external platform that we have got access to for all of the National 5 and higher courses that we can, and it allows pupils to really delve into the revision in a bit more detail. They can self-evaluate and figure out what their areas of strengths and weaknesses are. They can learn a little bit more about each of their courses, and they can also assess how well they're getting on in terms of each of their courses as well. So Achieve is something that we need the pupils to sign up to, and it's something that we will sit with the S4s and the S3s when they're in PSE, and we sign them up and help them support them signing up with this. Once they're logged onto here, they would choose their relevant courses. I've just chose a few examples here, and I'm going to talk through the National 5 Physics one again just because it's my subject. I can explain that in a little bit more detail. So if I was a pupil sitting National 5 Physics, I have 3 options in terms of revision within Achieve. I could self-evaluate, which means that I can identify my area of strengths and areas for development. I can then learn some of the key concepts from my courses, or I can test my knowledge of the course. So first of all, I'm going to look at self-evaluation. Within National 5 Physics, there are 6 sub-units, which are listed just here. So I've got dynamics in space, electricity, properties of matter, waves and radiation. And if I wanted to self-evaluate how well I was doing within each of those topics, each of those units has a little tab at the very top here. Now, the reason this has been so successful since we've embedded it is because it is so directly linked with the SQA standards. So in physics, for example, within the waves topic, it gives me exactly everything that the SQA could test me on at National 5 level in physics. So as I scroll down here, it gives me some key statements that I know that I need to know for the final exam. Now, each of those statements, it can seem a bit overwhelming because of the volume of the statements at first, but each of those statements is a key area that the pupils could then self-assess. So first of all, it's saying, I know that all waves transfer energy. If I feel like that's an area that I'm pretty confident with, I know that that's a statement and I'm quite comfortable with that. As a pupil, I would be able to access that and say, well, I'm agreeing for that one, I'm happy with that one. When I'm going through the rest of the statements, the next one says define transverse and longitudinal waves. I might not know what that is. I might have forgotten what that is in class. So I can get a little bit of an explanation by clicking on the green box. Now what that tells me is it tells me a little bit more about transverse and longitudinal waves. It gives me some diagrams, and it might trigger something from what I remember in class, but again I still might not be very confident with that, so I could assess that as I read. The idea is that pupils should then be able to self-evaluate their own knowledge, given reds, ambers and greens throughout the whole topic or unit, and then they're able to look at that summary. Once they have that evaluation for each of those topics, you would then have red, amber and green concepts listed. Now the benefit of this is it really structures their revision. It highlights the areas that they need to focus on and ensures that they spend their time in the areas that they do need help with. So first of all was the define transverse and longitudinal waves. That was the one that I highlighted as red. So I know that I now need to focus on that area. But it condenses it down for me. It means that I've got a few areas that I know that I need to focus on. Okay. Now that I know what I need to focus on, I'm going to go back to home and I'm going to do a little bit of learning. So now that I know that I need to focus on waves and defining transverse and longitudinal waves, I can go to the Waves tab. It's laid out exactly the same for the Learn section as the Self-Evaluate one, and it's got all exactly the same statements. So this was my red statement. I'm going to make that my priority in terms of revision. Now the way that Achieve is set up is actually so user-friendly. The pupils have seemed to love it since we bought this in February last year. The way that it's set up is it gives you that explanation again, which we had previously. It gives some further learning links, which is some key links to BBC Bite Size for more information. It gives you relevant YouTube clips that might be relevant to explain something in a slightly different way that might make a bit more sense. But all of these areas are relevant and that they're at the same level as the pupils will be working at. And that's sometimes difficult to find if you were just to have a quick Google search for transverse waves, or if you search for any physics concepts in particular. I find that when I'm trying to find relevant materials, it can sometimes not be the right level. But this makes sure that the pupils have got access to something that's the correct level and it's not going to confuse them further. On top of that, we've got some questions and activities. So this is just kind of like a flashcard one where they answer the question and they check the answer just for that repetition. And then it tells me any of the past paper questions that are relevant for that key area. So I can then spend a bit of time clicking on the links and having a look to see what areas of the course are linked with the SQA past papers. So these are from actual past papers, and then it means I can mark how I've done in each of those as well. So this constant learning cycle through different means, through reading, through watching videos, by seeing explanations slightly differently, by having this repetition, and by also seeing the wording in terms of exam technique, in terms of past paper questions, it's really just going to give a really good experience in terms of learning each of these key concepts. Once I feel like I'm maybe a bit more of an amber, or I'm feeling pretty good about that area, then I could go to assess each of these topics. Now again, it's structured in exactly the same way. I could then assess a topic, which would be maybe the wave section, or the unit, which is maybe a whole area, or the whole course if I was close to the exam. I'm going to assume that I'm doing a unit still, and I still want to focus on waves. And then I can choose a number of questions that would be relevant. So I'm going to choose 3 questions just now, and it's going to give me 3 relevant questions to the waves topic at National 5 Physics. So the multiple choice, I'll just choose a couple of solutions. And then finish. Now what I can see from this little quiz, I've only done 3 questions, but I got 100% of this area of strength and only 50% of this area of strength. So again, tells me what areas are my green areas, what areas are my amber areas. And then if there was any areas for development, anything at all that came out as reds, it would come up as an area for development at the bottom here. So again, it's this constant self-evaluation cycle. Then pupils can go back to self-evaluation, they can self-evaluate again, and they can repeat the process. Now this is available for many of the courses at National 5 and higher. There are more being added all the time as well. But it is for pupils in the senior phase, and again we're kind of pushing that towards S3s as soon as they start to come into close to their national qualifications and their S4 transition exam, when we're trying to encourage them to push towards national 5s. We are going to get them to use platforms like this so that they are getting used to these really, really early on. This is something the pupils have found very user friendly. I think at one point, 1 month, we had 45,000 questions answered in the assessment section. So not only just the self-evaluation or the learn section, we're talking the assess section where it's multiple choice questions. So even though this is a really new thing for us, in only 3 months we had 45,000 questions answered in a month. So on average just now they're answering about 13,000 questions, which is such a huge amount that they're accessing that already. So the pupils are really, really enjoying this as a platform. Okay, to kind of come back to the full section, just to give a quick overview. So although this was a very brief run through of each of the platforms that we use in Bishopbriggs Academy, I'm hoping it's given you some sort of insight to the tools that we use and what each of them is. And then if there is anything at all that you could potentially access with your pupil at home, with a young person at home, sorry, it means that then you can support them there as well as us supporting them in school. So first of all would be the Glow, making sure that they have access to Glow. It's their means of accessing all their tools. They are really confident accessing that, but if there is 1 or 2 that are struggling with it, please get in touch. A wee reminder that that gives you the OneDrive, which is the Microsoft Office platforms like Word or PowerPoint or Excel, which helps them in terms of completing any work. Satchel 1 is probably the most important platform out of all of these, because that's how we communicate with pupils and with yourselves at home. We make sure that everything's on top of the dates in the diary, and we make sure that they're on top of what they have coming up, any homeworks or assessments, and it helps make sure that nothing's missed. We've then got Microsoft Teams, which I've showed you an extension of the classroom. There's a great range of digital resources available, and it's now even grown to become a really great supported study platform for us for universal supported study. And then I spoke through Achieve as well, which is another platform for revision resources that's suitable for pupils completing any national qualifications. But again, the S3s will be kind of spoken through how to access Achieve in the coming months as they move towards their transition exams. The one that I haven't spoken through in a huge amount of detail, but I will be sending some information across on, is our YouTube platform. That really is, again, just one place where you can get a load of resources from different departments, any relevant videos that are the right level again, any further help and support from departments in terms of other ways of explaining things. There's just lots of stuff there on YouTube from departments. We also put things up there like tonight's recording, just as a reference point for you as well.